Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker and today's video is another episode of NBA Trade Machine, and this one covers DeMar DeRozan of the San Antonio Spurs. Now in case you missed it, there was an article, I believe last week or maybe this past weekend, mentioning that the San Antonio Spurs could potentially be looking to move on from some of the core pieces of this team, specifically DeMar DeRozan, and the most specific team that was mentioned as a trade partner was the Orlando Magic. So that's why we're doing this video. As always, you guys sent me some trades over on Twitter and then I added in some of my own as well to see some places we could possibly send DeMar DeRozan. First up, RJ Barrett's son says the Orlando Magic would get DeMar DeRozan in exchange for Mo Bamba, Evan Fournier, a 2020 first round pick, and a 2021 second round pick. All right, so I felt like it made the most sense to begin with the Magic just because that's the team that was most specifically mentioned in the article that I covered in an SL show earlier this week, or maybe it was late last week. And so we're gonna start with this trade for the Magic, and then I have one of my own as well because there were so many Magic trades that were sent to me that I felt like it was necessary to do two, one that you guys sent and then one that I did. As far as this trade specifically, for the Magic, of course, the reason that they want to get DeMar DeRozan is because their guard play has been lacking. Evan Fournier is a good scorer. DJ Augustine is a solid point guard, but they don't obviously have an all-star caliber player in the backcourt, which is continually surprising for a team that picked so high in the lottery for so many years, and now they have all of these front court players. So essentially they're cashing in on Fournier, who's a solid backcourt player, and Mo Bamba, who's one of the many potentially talented front court players they have, in exchange for an all-star level backcourt player in DeMar DeRozan that will score for them, maybe in different areas than some of the other players on the roster, and he will be kind of their second all-star alongside Nikola Vucevic in an attempt to vault them more into like a top 5 seed potentially in the Eastern Conference playoffs. In terms of the compensation, you've got Bamba. Depending on your evaluation of him, he is still a big asset to some people, and other people are starting to give up on him because of some of his struggles. I'm kind of in the middle ground there. I don't think he's incredibly valuable as a player, but I do think still he has plenty of promise, and that can be valuable to other teams depending on which team you're trading with. I don't know if the Spurs are one of those teams, but still has a good amount of value. Fournier to the Spurs specifically, I feel like is a good asset because he's a player that they can plug in kind of to the DeMar spot. He's not as good of a player as DeMar DeRozan, but they wouldn't completely bottom out by losing him and replacing him with Fournier. He's someone that should play well within their system. And then you got Bamba as well to kind of continually lift this team up, because that's one of the things about these DeMar DeRozan trades for the Spurs is it's not going to be like a complete rebuild situation, at least in my opinion. They're going to be wanting to get some current assets as well as future assets in exchange for him in an ideal scenario, and then you've got the pick as well. So in terms of a return for the Spurs, this is pretty significant value. I mean, you're getting a player in Fournier that's a solid player. You're getting Bamba that's a pretty high potential player down the road depending on your evaluation. Then you're getting a first round pick and a second as well. I would imagine the first round pick would be lottery protected or at least top 10 protected from the Orlando Magic. So if I'm the Spurs, I'm probably saying yes to this. And if I'm the Magic, it kind of depends on where I'm at in my season, because in my opinion, this is a good amount of value to give up for a player that actually has a player option for this offseason, by the way. So I probably am saying no to this if I'm the Magic. This is probably a little bit too much value for me, but still I can see the thought process here. Next up, let's go to that other Magic trade, the one that I came up with, and this is DeMar DeRozan, Lonnie Walker, and Trey Lyles going to the Spurs in exchange for Evan Fournier and Aaron Gordon. Now this one is a little bit different than the first trade, obviously, because you're basically switching out Bamba in the pick for a more current asset in Aaron Gordon in addition to Fournier for the Spurs. So I talked about Fournier a ton on the first one. You guys already know what his deal is. Aaron Gordon would be another interesting fit for this team as kind of a 3-4 combo. Really good athlete, someone that can kind of provide a little bit more energy and youth to this team, specifically in the front court. The Spurs have a ton of young guards they're trying to work into the rotation, in addition to guys like DeRozan and Patty Mills that have been there for a little bit. So they're really trying to maybe log jam their backcourt, if that's even a right way to phrase that. So getting only Fournier and then getting a front court player like Gordon, or like in the first trade getting someone like Bamba in the front court, that stuff makes sense. This is pretty good value. In terms of the Magic, they're getting a little bit more back in this because they're not just getting DeMar, but they're also getting one of those young guards I talked about for the Spurs in Lonnie Walker, and then Trey Lyles is essentially just there to make the salaries work. So in my opinion, I think the Magic are giving up slightly more in this, because I think if you're talking about Bamba plus like a lottery protected first, I think Aaron Gordon is a little bit more more valuable than that, but they're also getting back Lonnie Walker as another potentially good young guard for them that the Spurs don't necessarily need because they have Murray and they have White and they have Keldon Johnson and they have all these other guys they're trying to work in the backcourt. So potentially Lonnie Walker could be expendable. Now, I'm probably saying yes to this on both sides. I'm still slightly hesitant if I'm the Magic, again, just because DeMar could potentially be a free agent this offseason if he chooses to, if he doesn't want to be in Orlando anymore. But I think this is pretty good value on both sides. But now we're going to move on to some different teams other than just the Magic. Chef David sent me a trade in which the Timberwolves would receive DeMar DeRozan in exchange for Naz Reid, Jarrett Culver, and Gorgui Dieng. Now, straight off the bat, you can see that this isn't as much value in return for DeRozan as the Magic were willing to give up in the first trade, but the premise is relatively similar. The Timberwolves are looking for a boost to their backcourt, a little bit more punch in their backcourt. It's been assumed that it's going to end up being a point guard that they're going to go and get because they kind of already have a wing that's playing well in Andrew Wiggins, but I could also see the DeMar DeRozan thing potentially working out because he's improved as a playmaker over the last few seasons, most specifically last year with the Spurs. In terms of the compensation, Naz Reid not really counting as anything at this point. Gorgui Dieng is essentially a big expiring contract for next year, but he does still have some salary for right now. Could provide the Spurs with some front court depth, but really the big piece here is Jarrett Culver. And I wouldn't expect this to be like a realistic move for the Timberwolves to give up, quote unquote, on Jarrett Culver so quickly after they drafted him. To be fair, he hasn't looked good to this point, but I don't see a team that's kind of on the rise at this point in terms of exceeding expectations that were set for them coming into the season. I don't see them just dumping the top 10 pick that they just had in exchange for someone like DeMar DeRozan. Now, it could happen, but again, not the most realistic thing in my opinion. In terms of just perceived value, however, this is pretty good value for the Timberwolves to get. Basically, this is a Culver for DeRozan swap in my mind because I'm not highly valuing either Dieng or Reid in this deal. For the Spurs, it just kind of depends on where their priorities are. More so than the two Magic trades, this is more of a rebuilding type trade than it is like a let's be good and also be good down the road kind of situation. So they're probably saying no to this. This probably isn't enough value for DeMar, or at least not the kind of value that they would be seeking as long as Greg Popovich is still the coach. So this is probably a no from the Spurs and more than likely a yes from the Timberwolves if they were willing to give up on Jarrett Culver so quickly. Next up, Jason has a Pacers trade in which they received DeMar DeRozan in exchange for Miles Turner and Doug McDermott. Now, on the surface, this one doesn't seem all that exciting, right? But I actually find this really interesting because down the road, I'm planning on doing kind of like a what should the Indiana Pacers do kind of video, because it's pretty clear at this point that they play better when they are dealing with only Sabonis or only Turner in the front court, and when they play together, certainly when they start together, they're just not as good, and so they have to figure out something to do there. Both of those players are signed to long-term extensions, but in my opinion, that partnership is just not going to last long-term, so they kind of have to figure out what to do there. So this kind of delves into that a little bit, which piques my interest. Now, in terms of the trade itself, the reason the Pacers would want DeRozan is pretty obvious. They need a backcourt partner for Victor Oladipo. Obviously, Malcolm Brogdon is there, but those three guards all together would be really good. I think you could definitely play them together in the modern NBA because Oladipo is really good defensively, Brogdon is solid defensively, and that kind of makes up for DeRozan's relative lack of defense. And this would be a really nice trio of guards for them while also kind of consolidating that front court logjam that they have, at least in my opinion, by getting rid of Turner and then just sliding Sabonis into the 5 spot. And this would be a really good starting unit in terms of offense. In terms of defense, I'm not 100% certain they'd be great, but Nate McMillan can kind of try and make some things work there. In terms of what the Spurs would be getting in return, I think Sabonis would be awesome in San Antonio. I would love to see him there. He's locked up long term. I think he's got 4 more years left on a deal after this season on pretty good salary, and I think it would be an awesome trade to see him in San Antonio, see him in that system, whether it's now when Pop is there, even moving forward. I think it would be a really good piece for them, a better piece for them than he would be for even some other teams, and then you're getting a floor spacer in McDermott. So more so than any trade that we've talked about to this point, I think this makes a lot of sense for both teams, and I would love to see this actually happen in real life. So good job to Jason sending this to me on Twitter. This is probably my favorite trade that anybody sent me on Twitter this week. So congrats to you, and I think this is a really cool trade. Next up is a trade that I came up with, and it's DeMar DeRozan going to the Pistons in exchange for Reggie Jackson, Svi, Langston Galloway, and a lottery-protected first-round pick in 2020. Now, the reason I did this one is because I had, just like the Magic stuff, I had a ton of people sending me Pistons trades, and I looked through them, and it's not that they were all bad, it's just that they were all relatively similar, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. So here's my thinking. This obviously isn't as much value as you're getting for DeRozan and some of these other trades. Essentially, you're getting the Reggie Jackson expiring contract, you're getting Svi, who could be something, you're getting Langston Galloway, who's an expiring, and then you're getting the lottery protected pick. Potentially, you can move it down to top 10 protected, but regardless, you're probably getting that pick anyway, because I don't think it's going to be that low anyway. Now, this is basically the Spurs want to trade DeRozan, but the other trades they're getting are not great value in return for him, and they kind of settle for this deal. You could maybe talk them into potentially involving someone like Luke Kennard, although I highly doubt that would be the case because he is actually playing pretty well. So this is pretty much all the Pistons have to offer. Like, they have a rookie that they just drafted, but I don't think they're going to want to involve him. So pretty much they have expirings, they have filler, and then they have their own pick. For them, in terms of on the court, this would get rid of Reggie Jackson. Derrick Rose would be the full-time, this is our point guard kind of guy. Then you got DeMar DeRozan, then you've got Blake Griffin, then you've got Andre Drummond, and then you figure it out at the 3 spot, or you could put DeMar at the 3 and Luke Kennard at the 2. And that's a pretty good starting 5. That's a playoff caliber starting 5 in the Eastern Conference, and that's kind of what they're thinking here in terms of what they're trying to build with this deal. For the Spurs, I already kind of talked about the lack of compensation. I highly doubt that they would take this deal unless it's just like they've already accepted that they want to move DeMar for whatever reason, and they want to just get whatever kind of value they can because they don't really like any of the other trades. But, you know, I kind of like to do this where I have a range of like a ton of value for DeMar or whoever player I'm talking about in the trade machine videos, and then not as much value on the other end of the spectrum. And this certainly is on the not as much value side of it, but still interesting to look at in my opinion. And then last up, Andy says that the Miami Heat would receive DeMar DeRozan in exchange for Goran Dragic and Myers Leonard. It seems like we end up doing a Heat trade in like every single one of these videos, but that's because they're one of the biggest like trade to make teams in the entire league at the moment. And I like the little rationale that he gave. He said, if Miami wants to hunt for stars and the Spurs want to clear cap, this works. And that's pretty much what this comes down to. I do have some issues for this in terms of what the Spurs are receiving. But first, let's talk about the Heat. So this is all about pairing Jimmy Butler and DeMar DeRozan with what they already have in Miami, and they're sacrificing their 6-man kind of point guard at the moment in Goran Dragic, and then some front court depth in Myers Leonard. The fit between DeRozan and Butler isn't outstanding, but it would at least add some star power to their roster, and it wouldn't be as expensive long-term as, say, someone like Chris Paul's really, really big extension that you're going to have to deal with down the road. So from that perspective, it kind of makes sense, even though, again, the fit might not be great. They should at least be able to score the ball in different ways. Jimmy Butler can do some more ball screen stuff. DeRozan can do some more ISO stuff. They can both do ISO stuff. Like, they can kind of play off each other. You can start to envision a world in which this could possibly work. My issues here are the Spurs aren't really getting anything back for this. I mean, Goran Dragic is an expiring contract. They could bring him back, obviously, in the offseason, but you would rather not be trading for an expiring player in this situation. Myers Leonard is the same way, and I'm not convinced he's a hugely valuable player anyway. So for this to work, for Miami to get DeMar DeRozan, I like the initial framework here, but they have to give up something more. They have to give up like an okay young player or find a way to get a draft pick in a different trade and then move it because they don't really have their own draft picks to deal here. So it has to be that kind of situation. And this is a roadblock that we kind of continue to run into with Miami trades is they're so set on not trading guys like Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo, and rightfully so. Like, they should hold on to those guys, but they don't really have a ton of other assets that are movable trade pieces except for like big expiring contracts, and they don't really have their own picks either. So I like the initial framework, and I think this is a possible thing if they're willing to kind of deal with the fit issues between Butler and DeRozan. But this trade specifically, in my opinion, doesn't work, but I do appreciate you sending it in. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.